The air was a biting knife against my skin, but I hardly noticed. I was too busy watching the small, shivering figure in front of me. "Aunt Sarah, please," she whimpered, her voice a reedy whisper. "It's too cold out here." Lily's cheeks were an alarming shade of red, and her tiny gloved hands were clenched into fists at her sides. She looked pathetic. "Then freeze," I said, the words a perfect, cutting frost on my tongue. I watched as she took a shaky breath, her teeth beginning to chatter. It was a beautiful symphony of a child suffering. I knew my sister Maria would be furious, but I didn't care. I'd been watching her for weeks. A perfect little mother, wrapped in a blanket of domestic bliss I'd never wanted and never had. Every time she posted a picture of Lily's latest art project, or talked about some sweet little moment they shared, a bitter coal of resentment would burn in my chest. Lily was just the physical embodiment of everything Maria had that I didn't. Her perfect family, her comfortable life, her happiness. I told Lily to stand there while I checked my phone, and I deliberately left her for a good 15 minutes. The wind whipped her hair across her face, and her small body convulsed with shivers. A part of me, a tiny, buried part I refused to acknowledge, felt a flicker of something close to guilt, but I quickly snuffed it out. This was a lesson. The world wasn't a warm, safe place. It was a cold, unforgiving place, and you had to be tough to survive it. I wanted her to learn that. I watched her tears turn to ice on her cheeks and felt a strange sense of victory. My revenge was small, but it was satisfying. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. The moment I stepped inside, the heat hit me like a physical blow. Lily ran straight to Maria, her face buried in her mother's jacket. Maria pulled her close, her eyes finding mine over Lily's head. They were full of a quiet, furious fire. "What did you do, Sarah?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. "What are you talking about?" I said, feigning ignorance, pulling off my coat and tossing it onto the chair. "The kid's fine. She's just being dramatic." "Dramatic?" Maria's voice rose. I could hear her teeth chattering from the kitchen. "It's 30 degrees outside. What did you tell her?" I shrugged. "I told her to wait outside while I took a call. She's a little spoiled, Maria. You need to toughen her up. She's 8 years old, not a baby. She is my baby." Maria's face was flushed with anger. "And she's my responsibility, not yours to toughen up. You had no right to do that to her." "Oh, come on, it's not a big deal. She's fine." My sister's protectiveness was a source of endless irritation. I saw it as weakness, a way she wrapped herself in a cocoon of sentimentality. It was why she gave up on her career, why she chose a life I saw as small and insignificant. She was so consumed by her little world, she couldn't see the real one. Maria didn't say anything else, but her silence was more potent than any shout. She took Lily upstairs and returned with a grim look on her face. "I think you should go," she said, her voice strained. "I don't want you around her if you're going to treat her like that." The words were like a slap. I had expected a lecture, a fight, but not this, not a banishment. Maria's words haunted me for the next few weeks, though I would never admit it. The silence from my family was deafening. My mother called, but the conversation was strained. She didn't directly mention the incident, but her disapproval hung in the air like a thick fog. "Your sister is very upset, Sarah," was all she said, and it was enough. My father, always a man of few words, simply stopped answering my calls. I tried to invite them to dinner, but they were too busy. I knew what was happening. They were siding with Maria. It was infuriating. They were all overreacting. I didn't hurt the kid. I just made her uncomfortable for a few minutes. Why was everyone treating me like I was a monster? I had always been the strong one, the successful one. I had the high-paying job, the beautiful apartment in the city. Maria had a minivan and a mortgage. I thought they would admire my resilience, my no-nonsense attitude. Instead, they were choosing sentiment over strength. I found myself alone more often. My phone, once filled with texts and calls from my family, was quiet. My friends, mostly colleagues, weren't a source of real companionship. We were all too busy competing with each other. I would come home to my pristine, silent apartment, and the emptiness would press in on me. I'd try to distract myself with work, but my focus was off. I'd make mistakes, small ones at first, that would require me to stay late to fix. The coldness I had projected onto Lily was slowly seeping into my own life. leaving me isolated and unmoored. My professional life had always been my anchor, the one area where I was untouchable. My career was a fortress I'd built with long hours and ruthless ambition, but the cracks started to appear. A major presentation I was leading, a project I'd poured months of my life into, fell apart. My usually sharp mind was preoccupied, my focus scattered. I missed key details, and my normally polished delivery was riddled with stumbles. My boss, a man who rarely showed emotion, pulled me aside after the meeting. "Sarah," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "this isn't like you. Your performance has been lacking. We need to know you're fully committed to this project, because frankly, it looks like your head isn't in the game." The words stung, not because I was surprised, but because they were true. My unwavering confidence, the very foundation of my identity, was crumbling. The isolation from my family was a heavier weight than I had realized. I had always dismissed their love as a weakness, but now that it was gone, I felt unanchored. The professional disappointment was a direct consequence of my emotional state, a bitter pill I was forced to swallow. The icy satisfaction of seeing Lily shiver had been a momentary triumph, but the resulting emptiness was a lasting, bone-deep cold. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. My mother's birthday was a month later. I showed up with a gift, a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm I'd created. Maria and her family were there. The tension was suffocating. I tried to make small talk, but my words felt hollow, and the smiles I received were strained. Then, Lily walked over to me. I stiffened, ready for her to run away, but she didn't. She held a small, crumpled piece of paper in her hand. "This is for you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I took the paper and unfolded it. It was a drawing. On one side was a stick figure of me, with a face like a dark storm cloud and jagged lines coming out of my hands. On the other side was a picture of a little girl shivering, with blue crayon tears on her face. Next to her was a bright, smiling stick figure, with a sun for a face, holding her hand. It was Maria. The simplicity of the drawing was what hit me the hardest. It wasn't a tantrum or an accusation. It was just a child's pure, honest perception. It was the unspoken truth of what I had done, laid bare in crayon. It wasn't about being tough or strong. It was about being cruel. For the first time, I saw myself not as a powerful, independent woman, but as a bully who had made a little girl cry. The image of Lily's chattering teeth flashed in my mind, and the memory didn't bring me a sense of satisfaction anymore. It brought a flash of shame so hot it felt like a burn. My father called me a few days after the birthday party. I braced myself for the silence, for the clipped words, but he spoke in a measured, deliberate tone. "I saw the drawing Lily gave you," he said. My heart sank. "Dad, it's just a kid's drawing." "No, Sarah, it's not. It's a picture of how you made her feel, how you still make us all feel. It's a picture of the distance you've put between us. We've always been proud of your success, your ambition, but you've built it on a foundation of coldness. I don't recognize the person you've become." The words felt like a physical blow. My father, my quiet, stoic father, was expressing a level of disappointment I had never heard from him before. He wasn't mad. He was heartbroken. I had always thought his approval was tied to my career, to my achievements. Now I realized he just wanted me to be a decent human being. He continued, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Maria and I have our differences, but she's never hurt anyone the way you've hurt her, and the way you've hurt that child. I don't know what happened to you, but you need to figure it out, because if you don't, you'll be alone, Sarah. Truly alone." He hung up, leaving me in the deafening silence of my empty apartment. The fortress I'd built was now a prison, and I was its sole inmate. The realization was a devastating, crushing weight. The disciplinary review felt like a final, crushing blow. My boss, a man who had always viewed me as his top performer, sat across from me with a look of exhausted disappointment. "Sarah," he said, his voice stripped of all its usual corporate cheer, "you missed the deadline for the Crawford account. A full week. That's a 7-figure contract we almost lost. What is going on?" I had no good answer. The truth was, my mind was no longer a well-oiled machine, focused on market trends and quarterly reports. It was a chaotic mess of guilt and loneliness. My professional life, once a bastion of control and confidence, had become a direct reflection of the chaos in my personal life. The icy, professional demeanor I once wore like a suit of armor had cracks in it, and the pressure was too much. The review ended not with a firing, but with a warning, a probation period that felt worse than a dismissal. It was a slow, public unraveling. My social life followed a similar trajectory. Lunches with colleagues, once a platform for professional gossip and strategic networking, became awkward silences. My few work friends, who had always valued my ruthless ambition, now saw a vulnerability they didn't know how to handle. They didn't have to say anything. The way they skirted around me, the way their conversations would stop when I approached, was enough. The isolation was complete. I would come home to my meticulously clean, silent apartment, and the emptiness would press in on me from all sides. I would walk past the gleaming stainless steel appliances in my kitchen and the expensive artwork on my walls, and they no longer felt like symbols of my success. They felt like a cage I had built for myself, a gilded prison filled with things but devoid of life. At night, the silence was no longer peaceful. It was a screaming void. It was a blank canvas onto which my mind projected every single one of my mistakes. I replayed the incident with Lily, the cruel words, the chattering teeth, the look of utter confusion on her face. But it wasn't just that moment. My mind, now without the defense of work or social distractions, replayed 100 little cruelties. The sarcastic comments to Maria about her simple life, the way I'd dismissed my father's concerns, the general contempt I'd held for anyone who dared to choose happiness over ambition. I had used my sister's love as a weapon against her, mistaking cynicism for strength. The truth I had so successfully buried finally clawed its way to the surface. I wasn't strong at all. I was terrified. Terrified of being vulnerable, of needing people, of being hurt. I had used my coldness as a shield, but all it had done was sever me from the very people who could have protected me from the real dangers of loneliness. One night, the quiet was too much. I found myself sitting on my living room floor, my back against the couch, staring at my phone. 100 names flickered on the screen, a network of professional contacts and distant acquaintances, but not a single person I could call for help. I was a professional success, but a human failure. The tears finally came, not a graceful trickle, but a hot, desperate torrent that burned against my skin, a stark contrast to the coldness I had lived in for so long. The fortress I had so meticulously built had crumbled, and I was exposed, broken, and utterly alone. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. The tears that night were not a sign of weakness. They were the first true sign of life I had felt in years. They washed away the hardened shell I had built around myself, leaving me raw and vulnerable, but also capable of feeling. The next few days were spent in a haze of raw self-reflection. The world I saw outside my window looked different. The city skyline, once a beacon of my ambition, now seemed like a cold, impersonal monument to isolation. I looked at my life and saw a barren landscape. I had climbed the ladder of success with a singular focus, but at the top, there was no one to celebrate with me. I finally understood what my father had meant. I was alone, and I had put myself there. The memory of Lily's drawing, the one she had given me at my mother's birthday, kept replaying in my mind. I saw the storm cloud face, the jagged lines, the blue crayon tears. But now it wasn't just a child's drawing. It was a mirror. It was a pure, unvarnished depiction of the monster I had become. The image was more powerful than any confrontation, any lecture. It forced me to see the world through a child's eyes, to feel the terror and hurt I had so callously inflicted. I had been so consumed by my own bitterness that I hadn't even considered the pain I was inflicting. I had focused on my sister's perfect life and hadn't seen the beautiful, innocent child she was raising. I was the villain of this story, and I couldn't blame anyone else. I was the author of my own isolation. The regret was a physical ache, a new kind of cold that settled deep in my bones. It was the crushing weight of knowing you have done something terrible, and that it is too late to fully take it back. I knew I couldn't just say I'm sorry and expect everything to be okay. Years of dismissiveness, of snide comments, of a general lack of empathy had created a deep, festering wound in my family. The first step wasn't to fix it. It was to acknowledge it, to own it, and to accept that I might never be able to fully heal it. The urge to reach out to Maria was a terrifying, gut-wrenching pull. I opened my phone and scrolled to her contact. My thumb hovered over the call button, my heart pounding in my chest. A part of me, the old Sarah, wanted to run away, to pretend I was still the person who didn't care. It was easier to be the villain. But a new part of me, a part that was still fragile and weak, knew that if I didn't face this, I would forever be that person. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I couldn't live with that. The fear of being rejected by my sister was immense, but the fear of remaining a prisoner of my own making was far greater. With a trembling hand, I pressed the button. The phone rang twice, then 3 times. Each ring was a hammer blow to my chest, a final opportunity for Maria to hang up and leave me in the solitude I deserved. But she answered. Sarah? Her voice was cool, distant, and laced with a weariness that cut me deeper than any anger. Maria, I said, my voice shaky, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. I need to talk to you. I'm so sorry. The words felt inadequate, hollow. How could sorry possibly encompass years of jealousy and malice? Sorry for what, Sarah? Which time? Her bitterness was justified, a shield she had built against a lifetime of my emotional abuse. For everything, I said, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down my cheek. For Lily, for what I said and what I did. I was wrong. About everything. There was a long, agonizing silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her quiet breathing, a silent judgment that felt heavier than any shout. I thought for sure she would hang up. It's not that easy, Sarah, she finally said, her voice softer, but no less firm. You can't just apologize and pretend it never happened. You broke my trust. You hurt my daughter. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern of behavior that's gone on for years. You've always looked at our lives and judged us. You've always had a way of making me feel small and insignificant. And you used my child to prove some point you were trying to make. I don't know what you were trying to teach her that day, but you ended up showing me how little you care. Her words were a truth I had always run from, and hearing them out loud was devastating. I know, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I know it's not that easy. I don't expect you to forgive me. I want you to know that I see it now. I see how much I messed up. I'm not asking for a quick fix. I'm asking for a chance to try and make things right, in whatever small way I can. If there's any way, I'll do it. We talked for over an hour. There was no magical reconciliation, no big hug, no promise that we would ever be the sisters we once were. She told me she needed time, and that Lily was still a little afraid of me. She said it would be a long, slow road, and that she wasn't promising a destination. The conversation ended with a promise to maybe, one day soon, get coffee. It was the smallest of victories, but it felt monumental. It was the beginning of a long, difficult journey, but for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I was walking it alone. 2 years passed. The initial high of my conversation with Maria faded, replaced by the hard reality of my new life. I had lost my high-paying job. My reputation in the industry was too damaged to recover, and after a difficult period of unemployment, I had to start over at a new, smaller company, taking a significant pay cut. My beautiful, expensive city apartment was now a financial burden I couldn't afford, so I sold it and moved to a small, unassuming house in the suburbs, only a few miles from my family. It was a conscious decision to trade my old symbols of success for a life of quiet humility. My relationship with Maria was still fragile. We would meet for coffee once a month, and the easy camaraderie we once shared was gone, replaced by a cautious respect. We talked about her kids' school, my new job, and the weather. The heavy topics of my past cruelty and our broken relationship were the elephants in the room that we carefully avoided, though their presence was a constant weight between us. My parents were more willing to talk, but their disappointment was a ghost that still haunted our conversations. The consequences of my choices were permanent, a lasting scar on the fabric of my life that could never be erased. I was at Maria's house one afternoon, helping her in the garden. It was a crisp, cold winter day, the kind where the air stings your cheeks. Lily, now 10, walked up to me, her small hands cupped around a delicate pink flower. "It's a camellia," she said, her voice soft. "They bloom in winter, when it's cold. You have to be careful with them, though. They're fragile." I looked at the flower, then at her. Her eyes held a kindness and a wisdom that I didn't deserve. The child I had tried to break was now a small, resilient person, a testament to her mother's warmth and her own inner strength. "It's beautiful, Lily," I said, my voice thick with emotion. She smiled a small, shy smile, her cheeks rosy from the cold. "I know," she said. "Even when it's cold, things can still be beautiful. Right, Aunt Sarah?" I looked at her, at the small, beautiful, and resilient girl I had tried to break and failed. She had learned a lesson, but not the one I had tried to teach her. She had learned that warmth and kindness could survive even the harshest cold, and that love was a shield against the world's cruelty. And in that moment, I realized that I had finally, truly learned my lesson. I was not the strong, cold person I had tried to be. I was just a person, and I had made a terrible mistake. The past was a wound that would never fully heal, but looking at Lily, I saw a fragile but real hope for a future I could choose to be a part of. The journey back was long, and I knew I had a lifetime of atonement ahead of me. If you've enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thank you for watching.